Well, hello, welcome. I see Mumsy's in the house. Glad to see you here. I know it's early for you in the Pacific time, uh, but I'm glad that you made it and that you're here. That's wonderful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Cambodia today. There was a mosquito. If you see my eyes kind of like latch onto something, it's a mosquito, and I'm wondering, can I get it? um, Today is a national public holiday. It is called Victory Over Genocide Day or just Victory Day. In Cambodia, they call it Prambi Makara, which translates the 7th of January, because that is the day on which it is celebrated. And that is basically the day that Phnom Penh fell after the Khmer Rouge time. So at the end of the video, so I'm going to kind of give like a little bit of a lecture on the recent history, the kind of a timeline of events in Cambodia, and then I will show some footage of the ceremony that took place today. And Frugal is in the house. Good to see you. Indeed. So, what I have to share with you today. Let's see here. This is the whiteboard from when I gave a lecture in class on this topic. And I'm not sure if I got it or not. And I wish that I had like one of those electronic overhead projectors, and then I could like write, because it's funner. That's not a real word. It's more fun if you have a blank board and then I'm filling in everything as we go along, right? But since I don't have that technology available to me tonight, I will just show you this, and you can kind of follow along if you want, or you can just walk away and do some chores or something and just listen. More funner. I know. I caught myself. Yeah, English tutor that I am, and writer and editor. So I better get my English right. So we're going to concentrate on from the period of independence, which was 1953, up until today. And I just want to like briefly mention that Cambodia was kind of like on its own and undiscovered to the rest of the world until the 1800s, the 1860s to be exact. And that's when the French kind of got involved. They're like, hey, we nobody else has colonized this area, and we're, look at all these temples, look at this culture, look at the rubber, the rubber trees, look at the salt, look at the pepper, and so they entered into a treaty or agreement with the king at the time. And Chalet is in the house. Woohoo! Still mostly undiscovered until this day, to be honest. Frugal, you hit the nail on the head. Oh my gosh, that is so true. And so anyway, they entered the agreement, and rather than, the king was pretty smart. He's like, we don't want to be a colony, but we'll accept you being, we'll accept being a protectorate. Okay, so and France also colonized, I believe, Vietnam and Laos. So the three became Indochina or Indochine. So sometimes you hear that, and it refers to this area. Southern Vietnam might have actually been called something different. like Chenla or Cham or something. I mean, those are terms that have been used throughout history for that area, but I'm not sure what it was then. So there might have been like 4, but eventually they kind of morphed into like all of it being Vietnam. Anyway, we're here to talk about Cambodia. So that lasted for 90 years. And then in 1953 is when Cambodia got independence. Prior to that, in 1941, Sihanouk, King Sihanouk was crowned king. Now he was only 18 years old, and there's basically 3 bloodlines that the king has to be chosen from. It's not hierarchical or whatever, where it goes to the son or even to the daughter, so like where there's a next in line there, that doesn't exist in Cambodia. There is no next in line. There is a committee, a special council that is designated to choose the next king. And it has to be one of 3 bloodlines. One is Norodom, one is Sisawat, and one is Andong. Okay, which is rarely ever taught. Everybody knows the Norodom and Sisawat lines. Plenty of, princes and princesses with those names, but the Andong line isn't really, thought of very much. But it exists, and according to the Constitution, it's got to, or whatever. I don't know if it's in the Constitution or if it's just the tradition. It's the 3 bloodlines. So it did, and so the French actually had some influence in, they thought they'd be able to control this 18-year-old kid. So they pushed for him, and so he was chosen to be king, and that was in 1941. So then World War II happens, right? The Japanese were here. The French kind of had, even though they had like the Vichy government in France, and they were kind of connected with the axis of evil, they still had to leave and let Japan occupy Cambodia. So in that period of time, there's not a lot of records about, and there's not that many old people left that can talk about that time, that would have memories. So after the independence, though, because then he wasn't as complacent as the French hoped he would be, and when they came back after the World War II ended and the Japanese left and France came back, King Sihanouk began negotiating for the independence, which was finally achieved in 1953. In 1955, he decided to abdicate the throne to his father. And he did this because the Constitution did state that that there needs to be a king and a prime minister, and it cannot be the same person. And he wanted to be prime minister and involved in foreign affairs, more than he wanted to be king. So he abdicated. His father died, and then his mother was chosen as queen. So there was Queen Kosamak for a while. And now we're entering this period, which is called Sangam. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Frugal says, I need to stop making videos, making people want to come here. I know. Come visit, but don't, and then go away. Spend your money and then go away. No. So officially, like 1955, the Sankam Restranium, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Sankum, I think, is right. It literally translates as the People's Socialist Community. And so this period is actually now looked back on as the golden era. Okay. There were movies, there was music. You've got all the 60s. So about 15 years from everything that was happening in America with with rock and roll and pop culture exploding was also exploding here. They totally embraced everything modern. That's how you feel about Florida, right, Chalet? Come visit and then spend your money, go away. So this golden era had everything modern. It had so much modern that you got to. We're so used to cities and skyscrapers all over the world, but you guys know that like the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building were two standalone skyscrapers above everything else in New York City, right? And then you ended up getting the Sears Tower, which is now called something else. I don't care because I know it as the Sears Tower in Chicago that became, the World Trade Centers, I think were before the Sears Tower. So, and they were built in the early 70s. Okay, the World Trade Center. When they built the World Trade Center, that was like the beginning of the super skyscrapers. Right. And so they held the tallest building in the world for a while. And then the Sears Tower held it for a long time. But they weren't, so this golden era that we're talking about is before the World Trade Center was even built. Okay. So you got to step back in time. There were no skyscrapers anywhere else in Asia. Now we think of Beijing, we think of Shanghai, we think of Hong Kong. We think of Japan and Tokyo. We think of Singapore. We think of Kuala Lumpur with the Petronas Towers. We think of Bangkok, as the modern cities, right? None of that was built in the 60s. None of that happened until the 70s and thereafter, right? So Phnom Penh actually became the most modern city in all of Asia, not just Southeast Asia, all of Asia. Singapore got its independence and they came on a tour to Cambodia, to Phnom Penh, to see what a modern city looks like. And you think of how much more advanced Singapore is from Cambodia right now. It's one of the most high-tech modern cities in the world. And yet Cambodia at that time was the most modern city in Asia. They hosted the Olympics. They had all this great Art Deco and French colonial architecture, but they were once they achieved independence, they started a whole architectural movement, which is now called New Khmer, or some people might say Khmer, but it's spelled Khmer. We pronounce it Khmer here in Cambodia. Outside world usually says Khmer. And so it actually has a name. And Van Mollyvan was kind of like the lead architect in that. And there were a few others as well, but so many buildings were designed by Van Mollyvan. Stony in the house. Hey, Stony says, Chalet, I'm calling. You have something you have something important to tell her. We have good people looking out for us. Well, that's good to know. Okay. So during this modern time, you also have to realize the Vietnam War is going on next door. Then you also have, in order to build all this modern stuff, some people get displaced whenever you build something new. And so most historians are looking back on this time as the golden era but people who were living it weren't all happy and satisfied. Okay. And the country, like, let's just look at the demographics right now. There's 17 million people right now, and only about 2 million of them live in Phnom Penh. And, it's 15 million people are spread out throughout the countryside. Battambang is the second largest city, and it's probably like 500,000, if that, maybe 200,000. And I don't know how many people live in Siem Reap, but it's second to Battambang. So a very small portion of the population lives in Phnom Penh, where all the parties and everything were happening. He was also Prince Sihanouk was an avid filmmaker as well. And so all of this culture is happening. And there's a lot of people that are dissatisfied. Not only are they dissatisfied because they feel like they're not part of the fun, but they're dissatisfied because there's bombs dropping all over the country because of the Vietnam War. And I've heard it from some people, having lived here for so long, 17 years, if you don't know it, coming up on 18 years, that a lot of the pilots that were given coordinates to go drop bombs in Vietnam, they knew that if they flew over their target, there would be anti-aircraft, missiles or guns, or, they were in danger of getting shot down. So they would fly over Cambodia and drop their bombs, and then fly back to they were based out of Thailand. They were flying from Thailand, and so they would have to fly over Cambodia to reach Vietnam. It'd be about like an hour flight, and so they would just drop their bombs on Cambodia and then turn around and go back. So none of that is like, when you look at documented records of the U.S. government, they're not including that stuff. And the common story is that that the U.S. wanted to bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was right along the border of Vietnam and Cambodia. But every province of Cambodia got bombed. So all these people, they're getting bombed, their crops are bombed, and so they come. So there's a lot of like refugees, not from another country, but just from the countryside, flooding into Phnom Penh. And diplomatic relations with the U.S. disintegrated. Because Sihanouk was pretty much trying to be like a neutral Switzerland, kind of, where he, it's like, oh, Vietnam, you want to use the border for your Ho Chi Minh Trail? Go ahead. Oh, Russians, you want to come and, sell guns in our markets? Okay, go ahead. U.S., you want to come here and, dock in our harbor? Okay, go ahead. But that wasn't good enough for the U.S. And also Kissinger. Oh my gosh, Kissinger was very heavily involved and very evil in everything that happened. One little known fact, you guys know the song "For Dead in Ohio" by Neil Young, which also marked that, that very famous picture of those student protesters, and that the National Guard came and shot some of them, right? And it's a very famous picture of the girl kind of standing over one of the bodies and crying, looks like she's wailing. They weren't actually protesting Vietnam. Did you know that? They were protesting what was happening in Cambodia, because Prince Sihanouk had come to Ohio State University and gave a lecture or whatever about Cambodia, years prior to that. So there was kind of this connection that they had with Cambodia and what was going on. And so that's what they were protesting. But I know when I was growing up and, in American U.S. history, in high school and we see that picture and we learn about the Vietnam War, we hear only that they were protesting the Vietnam War as a whole. They don't teach us that it was actually about Cambodia. Yeah, Kissinger did nothing good for Cambodia, 100%. Fergal says Ohio it was Crosby, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Okay, not just Neil Young on his own. Okay, thank you for the correction. So that happened, so during this time, Sihanouk also has troops that are going around the countryside to maintain peace or whatever. I don't know what they're doing, but they're going around the countryside, and there's apparently records of like some massacres that happened. Were they incited and by some kind of actions, and so then these troops were quelling rebellions or uprisings or whatever, or were they just flat out massacres that were, well, what we would call a massacre, because otherwise we would just call it a battle, right? Your understanding is the Khmer people celebrated when Kissinger died. Is that true? I believe most of them did. Yeah. I know when I saw it, I was like, no RIP for him, rotten hell. It's like more, good riddance, I think is what I thought. Yeah, not good. Not good. If anybody's interested, there's a book called Sideshow. I don't remember the name of the author, maybe John Pilger or something. But it's called Sideshow, and it has so much detail, and there's like footnotes on every page that gives reference for every little piece of information, where it comes from. It really explains it well. Bye-bye. Baby's like barfing a little bit, but cats do that. Okay, so now we've got, so even though it's looked back on as this golden era, it was not all roses and honky-dory and everything's, oh, look at how wonderful everything is. There was a lot of discontent. Okay. Frugal says, I didn't feel bad about his passing. I never liked him. I guess I was Cambodian in a past life because he rubbed me the wrong way my whole life. Yeah, exactly, huh? I know. I completely understand. I feel the same way too, I think. So, I mean, I don't really believe in reincarnation, but I believe that there's some kind of spiritual connection. Anyway, so there's all this discontent. This is setting the stage for the U.S. to be able to prod people who are in the way the constitutional monarchy is set up is there's a Senate and there's a National Assembly. And I don't know which one or both voted. And so in 1970, Prince Sihanouk goes to France on a holiday or medical checkups or lectures or whatever, right? He's out of the country. And then they vote him out as prime minister. And instead they install a general named Lon Nol. And so it's very clear, because like when Phnom Penh fell, there's this one guy named Sirak Matak. It's like Sirik, Sirak Matak, Matak, I think is his name. I'll write it here. I think it's spelled like this. And when Phnom Penh fell, he tried to get into the French embassy was the only place where foreigners could go. If you guys have seen various movies and stuff, And then the Khmer Rouge finally put everybody that was in there into trucks and drove them to the Thai border. I was in an extra in a movie. I got to ride around in those trucks, dressed like a hippie. Anyway, so he penned a letter that is like, makes me cry every time I see it. And he describes how it's like, it's a letter to the US saying, you know, we trusted you and you've left us here to die. You know, because this, like, when Phnom Penh fell, and I'm not talking about the Victory Day fall, I'm talking about the first one in 1975. You know, the US helicopters came and evacuated the last of the US embassy personnel. And when they flew away, and there's not video footage, but like film footage of that helicopter being in a field, I think over near where Naga World is now. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's where it was. And it lifting off, and you know, that was it. People expected the US to keep them safe, because they kind of started it. You know, they're the ones that said, okay, put Lon Nol, make Lon Nol the prime minister. And then they gave all this funding and all this money and everything. But what they didn't realize was going to happen is that Prince Sihanouk would call to the people, you know, like through the radio and stuff, saying, pick up arms and fight against this tyranny, Lon Nol, to restore me back to the country, right? And at some point in this speech, he called them the Red Cambodians, right? Or the Khmer Rouge in French. Darn, out of my reach. It's amazing how much the narrative about the US changes when you're away from the hype machine in the West. They are seen as aggressors and instigators for a lot of bad things. This is true. This is true. Your mind opens up a lot when you back off the perspective. Let me tell you, my ancestors came on the Mayflower, not the Mayflower made more than one trip. Okay. So not the 1620 Pilgrim trip, but one of the other trips of the Mayflower. And before that, I mean, when you're talking Henry Hudson and the Hudson River and the Hudson Bay Company and the Dutch West India Company and all of this, they were there in the early 1600s before the Mayflower even came, depending on which line you follow, right? I have a great aunt who was officially a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and you got to show all your pedigree for that, right? So I kind of just have to show my pedigree to her because she'd already proved all of that. I was so patriotic. And now I just feel like I have the same spirit of my ancestors that left whatever country they came from, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Amsterdam. And they left their country to come to America for a better life. And I left America to come to Cambodia for a better life. Fergal says, hearing about the Vietnamese winning the war was my aha moment. I always heard about the loss in Vietnam and how bad it was, but the story was much different there. True. You know, a moment for me was back in 2006, the first time I came here to Cambodia. I kept asking my now Khmer brother, Sra, I kept asking him, how come people aren't still walking around? I get this, I get this, I get this, I get this. How come people aren't still walking around in the black pajamas today? How did it stop? Because I'm going to be going, that's what my lecture is about. We're going to get to these points, right? But in that moment, I didn't know any of this. And I kept pressing him, and he like wouldn't answer me. Finally, after about a week, I think, he finally said, well, the Vietnamese troops came. And I was just like, what? I couldn't wrap my head. It was one of those where you could literally feel the electricity in your brain going zing. Literally, I had one of the, I mean, there's only been a few times in my life where I've had that kind of moment, and that was one of them. I was just like, zing, what? The Vietnamese came? Because the Vietnamese aren't here now, right? Unless you believe that it's just puppets behind, which a lot of people do. And who knows if it's true or not. But, you know, that you don't see troops, Vietnamese troops on the streets, is what I'm saying. They went back after a period. Well, I'll get to those times. Mumsy says everything isn't always black and white. It's not, you know, and I used to believe firmly that, yeah, everything is black or white. It's very clear. It's very easy. Life is very easy. It's either black or it's white. What is this gray stuff? There's no gray, you know, and now I get it. You know, that, yeah, there's true. Anyway, so let's get back to the timeline. So we're at 1970. There's the coup d'etat, and Lon Nol is installed. The Khmer Rouge are people that are just everyday citizens throughout the country picking up arms to fight to get Sihanouk back. Because, hey, there was all this modern stuff going on. And by the way, by now, I think, when did the Vietnam War end? Let me check. I don't know. Vietnam War end. You notice that Google starting to do this whole, yeah, April 30th, 1975. Okay, so right after the Khmer Rouge took power. Okay, so all that bombing and stuff is still going on. No, wait, right when they took power. They took power on April 17th, 1975. Yeah. So during the Lon Nol time, all that bombing is still happening, and it's probably getting worse, right? And they thought things were going to get better well, actually, I don't think anybody was thinking anything. It was the government leaders in the Assembly and the Senate that voted for this change, right? All the people know is that the bombing is worse. They're hungry. You still have a lot of people in the city that, you know, there's culture, there's music, there's dancing and everything. I mean, life is going on in the city, but it's hard times. There's a civil war going on because people have picked up arms. So Lon Nol's trying to hold his power. He's getting all kinds of loans from the U.S., which is a whole subject about the U.S. government still wants that money paid back. Even though they're the ones that instigated everything. But so it's these 5 years, there's a civil war going on. People are continuing to crowd into Phnom Penh. Okay. And there's different factions. So you got to realize that even though there's this guy his name was Saloth Sar that studied in France, he came back to Cambodia here's my opportunity. He totally believed in communism that he learned about in France. Okay. So you had Mao taking over China. You had Stalin in Russia, you know. I guess, you know, he's like thinking communism is this great ideal. They're not getting it exactly right. But look there's this fighting in Phnom Penh, and his dad was killed by that was Sam Rainsy's dad, was killed by one of those massacres that we were just talking about. Okay, he's an opposition leader. So the Pol Pot comes in and starts leading some of these troops. All right, troops, forming them into troops called the Khmer Rouge. They're fighting a civil war. There's, so people over in this province over in the west are following one leader, and people in the north are following a leader, and people in the south are following a leader, people in the east are following a leader. Everybody's following a different leader. There's lots of different factions. All right. It wasn't this genocidal regime yet. Okay. They all think they're fighting for Sihanouk, to get Sihanouk back, to restore the golden era as we know it now. Right. And at some point close to April 17th, 1975, when the Khmer Rouge took Phnom Penh, Pol Pot and some of the other faction leaders, they met at the train station in Phnom Penh. They went upstairs into this room and they had this historic meeting. And at that point, I believe, is when Pol Pot said, "I'm brother number one." That's what he called himself, brother number one. Google is all AI now. It's very stupid. I double check everything it gives back to me. I know it's true. Okay, so now Pol Pot's in charge. So this is what we're talking about, the gray. It's so easy to think, oh, Khmer Rouge, genocide. Khmer Rouge, bad. But there were a lot of people that were fighting as part of the Khmer Rouge, fighting for Sihanouk, not fighting for Pol Pot. They were just as deceived. Okay. Yet, then you kind of get to a following orders situation, right? After 1975. So in case you didn't know, April 17th, it was, I believe in that year, I can look it up real quick, but that Khmer New Year was the 15th, 16th, and 17th. So it was like the last day of Khmer New Year. I will check though. Khmer New Year 1975. It's giving me the fall of Phnom Penh, blah, 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 blah. For some, Khmer New Year is forever linked to the Khmer Rouge. Yeah. I'm not seeing anything that like tells me like, okay, Khmer New Year 1975 was the 15th to the 17th. I'm not seeing that kind of answer, but it's, I'm pretty sure it was one of the days of, and probably, well, I don't think it ever goes like 16, 17, 18. I don't think it ever falls like that. It falls 13, 14, 15, 14, 15, 16, and then like 15, 16, 17. So I think it was the last day of Khmer New Year. I'm sorry, but it's murder, whether by order or not. I would never be able to follow an order like that. You're not built that way. Exactly. That's why I'm prefacing that definitely prior to that time, they were not necessarily genocidal. They were fighting a civil war. And now all of the atrocities that we know, how many of those original soldiers were exactly like that, said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then so they just killed them, So that morning, the troops roll in. There's all kinds of footage, right? Probably film. I'm not sure if they had video back then, maybe, but definitely film, right? Of the tanks rolling into the city. And all the Lung Nol soldiers, I mean, it was like our Civil War, or in the United States, brother against brother, right? They were just happy for it to. They didn't care who was going to be in control, right? Whether it was Lunal or the Khmer Rouge, probably assuming Sihanouk. They didn't care who was going to be the prime minister. They were just happy for the fighting to be over. They don't have to be out in the trenches anymore, right? So the Khmer Rouge come in, they're on tanks, everyone's cheering, everyone's happy. The war is over, right? Is what they're thinking. The soldiers are laying down their guns and they're happy. The people are happy. And then by the end of the day, all the soldiers are telling all the people there is an imminent bombing raid, that like the Americans are going to drop bombs on Phnom Penh. We need to evacuate the city. Only take what you need for 3 days. You will come back. Don't try to take anything else, just 3 days. And people like buried their jewelry in the ground and stuff like this. There were so many like treasure hunters when they came back into Phnom Penh. But they had to rush, and everybody listened. Everybody listened, and they evacuated. And there's, you can watch First They Killed My Father. You can read other books. You can see what that was like, right? There's other movies. There's other books about that evacuation. So that happened. And they never got to come back during the Khmer Rouge regime, right? Unless they were bringing them back to the S-21 genocide, the S-21 torture center, like interrogation center. Basically, if they thought someone was a traitor, they would bring them to this school. It was everything was abandoned in Phnom Penh, so they would bring them to this school, which was turned into an interrogation center, which was torture, and only 14 people, I believe, survived out of thousands that went through there. Anyway, it's a museum now, and if you ever come to Cambodia, you can go there, and it really, really, really gives you a deep understanding and an appreciation for how kind the people. I'm watching Frugal's videos. I'm watching other people's videos, and say one of the things about Cambodia is the people and how friendly they are and how happy they are. And when you understand the scale, I mean, we talk about the Holocaust. I'm sorry. I mean, this is on the same level. Of cruelty. S-21 was a difficult place to visit, a very powerful place. Yeah. I think Mumsy went there too. She was going to go out to the killing fields, but it was just way too far, and it was like a really hot day, and so she turned around and came back, which is fine. If you go to the Genocide Museum, that gives you perspective. Anyway, so everyone's evacuated. I'm not going to go into details about that time. We'll just say that it was what every Cambodian learns is Bai Chnam, from Bai Kai, Mupai Tangai. That's 3 years, 8 months, 20 days. So from April 17th, 1975 until January 7th, 1979 is 3 years, 8 months, 20 days. That's how long the regime was in control. That's how long all that stuff happened. And a note about that is they never call it Khmer Rouge. They call it Pol Pot. And when I was first here and teaching, and people were always doing that, I was like, look, it's the Khmer Rouge regime. If you want to learn English, it's called the Khmer Rouge regime, or the Khmer Rouge era. Or you could say Pol Pot era, but don't just say Pol Pot. Because the way they would use the English, they would say, during Pol Pot, my grandmother died or something, right? No, you can say during the Pol Pot era. And I've come to learn and understand that the reason they call it Pol Pot, or at least the Pol Pot era in English, that is because there were so many soldiers that were not fighting for Pol Pot, right? So it's come a long way since then, Mumsy says. And she says it was a very upsetting place. Yes, it is. I mean, you can't, you're not human if you don't walk out of there crying or cry while you're in there. You can wipe your tears before you walk out. But if you don't shed a single tear in that place, I don't think you're human. Or at least you don't have a heart. Maybe you're like the Grinch and your heart's too small. So that brings us to 1979. So there's an old punk song called Holiday in Cambodia. Yes, indeed. The final chorus is just them repeating Pol Pot, Pol Pot. Oh, I didn't remember that part of it. Yeah. But yeah, Holiday in Cambodia is kind of like, at least back in the day, nobody talks about it now, but like when I first moved here and it was a little bit more Wild West here. Yeah. And the Heart of Darkness and Off the Rails or something. It was very moving. She will always remember it, Mumsy says. So now we get to the point where it's like, the Vietnamese? What? Okay, because this is where we kind of get a split, all right, that affects Cambodia today, all right? On one hand, you've got the ruling party, the Cambodia People's Party, called the CPP, that very much wants to celebrate this day and how Hun Sen, historically, Hun Sen went across the border to get the Vietnamese to help, right? The opposition parties feel more like it was a Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia. Okay. And so there's very strong feelings on both of those, so you've got this split, right? And so whichever way you go, there's very strong feelings about that, because now you had civil war again, right? There are people, I've seen documentaries where people who lived through the Khmer Rouge time, during those 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days, they said it was peaceful. For the first time, there was peace. I had enough food to eat. Because if they were in the countryside and poor people in the countryside before the Khmer Rouge happened, that's all the city people, all those people that got evacuated from Phnom Penh, so all the people that had been refugees and went to Phnom Penh, and just everybody got lumped together. If you could speak a second language, if you had the reason it's like if you had glasses is because that meant you were rich enough to buy glasses. So you had to be an upper class, right? Those are the people that got one spoonful of rice every day in a broth, right? Everybody else, so they called them new people and old people. Old people were the poor people of the countryside. New people were anybody that had been living in Phnom Penh. Old people were living high off the hog. Old as in the poor countryside people, not old as in age. That song, Holiday in Cambodia, came out in 1980, so very close to the end of the Khmer Rouge, yeah. And the Khmer Rouge was recognized by the UN until the 90s. And the United States, all this, it's a hot topic right now, the amount of funding, especially with Ukraine and Israel and all this. So the amount of foreign aid that the U.S., so I help our people at home. There's inflation, there's medical, there's all these issues that working class people are dealing with, that And all this foreign aid is going to other countries. Well, up until the 90s, some of that foreign aid was funding the Khmer Rouge regime, as in Pol Pot. They recognized, so they kept their seat as the government of Cambodia in the UN until the 90s. That to me was mind-blowing when I learned that. But we're still back in 1979 and with the split. Okay, so historically, with no bias to either split, what happened? Right, this is where that zing. So, how did the Vietnamese? What? Hun Sen went across the border with, I think, 4 friends. I think there were 5. It's either him and 5 friends, or he was one of 5. Okay, went across the border because they did not like what was happening. Okay, I'm trying to be non-biased, right? Yeah. Well, why else would he? Just because he wanted to get control? Well, I guess maybe some people feel that way. I'm trying to be as non-biased as possible. He went across the border. He appealed. He didn't know. I mean, the first Vietnamese he was going to come across might think that look, there's Khmer Rouge soldiers. Let's shoot them, right? So whether you like him or not, he was taking a pretty big risk, I guess, unless you thought he was some kind of spy and was already in with the Vietnamese. I don't know. I don't know exactly how the opposition explains all this. I just know the history part. You wonder why I have little or no faith in the rest of the world. Some people. Okay. So he goes across the border. He convinces the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese say, we will not send troops, but we will allow any of our soldiers who wish to volunteer to join your cause. Okay. This is like December. Well, I think they started fighting in December of 79. I mean, excuse me, of 78. I'm not sure of the exact date he went across the border. That's a pretty big deal, actually. June 20th, 1977. Okay. So it fell in 75, 76. After 2 years, he's like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go try and get help. Right. So June, because I've got a little brochure about it. Okay. And so a year later, he's got the volunteer army, and they cross the Vietnam border with Cambodia, and they start fighting, and there's hardly any resistance. They win. It goes so fast. It's like they came across, and I wonder if it says here. No, it's just talking about that June 20th, 1977. Pretty sure it was December of 78 when they came across. And by January, it's like less than a month, they took Phnom Penh, right? And so that is where today, Victory Over Genocide Day, or Victory Day, comes from, to commemorate that taking of Phnom Penh. Now, like I said, now some people feel like because there were the Vietnamese troops, that they were invaded, because now enter 10 years of civil war, right? Again, but still this time civil war with Vietnamese troops. Okay. And hey, atrocities happen during war. It's war, and it's horrible, and we don't like war, and we don't want war. But it's already happened. And during war, people kill each other. And so there were Vietnamese troops that killed Cambodians. And if that was your brother or your father or your sister or your mother or your grandmother or your child, you know, it's easy for that hatred to go toward the Vietnamese. Okay. Because we got to, you know the saying, unless you've walked a mile in somebody else's shoes, right? So there's a lot of hatred toward the Vietnamese. And maybe some of that also then, it's like, well, Hun Sen is the one that brought them over here. And then they killed my mother or something, right? So I don't blame anyone if their experience and the mile that they walked in their shoes leads them to be part of an opposition party and not support the ruling party. Those are the terms we use in English here in Cambodia, like in the newspapers and things like that. And there is more than one opposition party. I don't know, there's like 15 or something that were like on the ballot when they had the last elections. So and how did the Civil War end? Okay, so that's how the Khmer Rouge got run out of Phnom Penh, but they still had strongholds. Up in Pol Pot went up to the north in An Long Vang. I don't know who was in charge of the people over by Koh Kong, and I don't know, maybe Palin or something. There's other, I don't know that much. But Koh Kong was a stronghold, and Odar Menche is the name of the province in the north. That was a stronghold, and that's where Pol Pot was. So the first thing that happened was in 1991, the Paris Peace Agreements were signed, or the Paris Peace Accords, or the Paris Peace Agreement. It's called both in 1991, because it was a meeting. And so Sihanouk is still alive. I don't think he had come back into Cambodia yet. And so 1979, excuse me, that the peace accords get signed, and then that initiates UNTAC, what we call UNTAC. That is the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia. So that is like peacekeepers that came to Cambodia to help prepare for elections. And those elections, so they arrived in 1992. The elections were held in 1993. They still stayed for about 7 or 8 years, so almost a decade. So you had from 70 to 75, 5 years of civil war. Then you had almost 4 years of the genocide. Then you had 10 years, the entire 80s were civil war. There's a decade. And then another decade of the Khmer Rouge not wanting to accept the Paris Peace Agreement and still fighting. They still had their strongholds. It wasn't like, it wasn't like the war, like this when it was the Civil War and it was constant battle. It wasn't that as much as they refused to leave. They refused to give up their guns. They refused, and maybe skirmishes, right? So there was some fighting, but, and then add to it that like in 1993, when they had the elections, it was really close between Prince Sihanouk, he's called King Sihanouk now, And when he came back, I don't think he was ever like a prime minister again. So I think he came back as king. So where was I? He came back. Oh, the elections. So his son Norodom Ranariddh. So Norodom Ranariddh won and became first prime minister, and Hun Sen was second prime minister. Okay, because I think it's like if you don't have a full majority, then you like if it's too close. It's kind of like in the U.S. where we have the 2/3 thing, you know. So you can have like a 50% plus one, or you can have a 2/3 majority, right? And it was kind of like that 2/3 majority type of thing. I'm not saying that's exactly what it was. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was close enough that I think they would have had to have had a runoff. And so like then you just have an election between those two, right? And so they agreed that rather than have another election, they would just accept first and second prime minister. So there was also some dynamics there going on. And they were both making their attempts to achieve peace with the Khmer Rouge, with the remaining Khmer Rouge that weren't giving up. Okay, they both had their own strategies that they were going through, and there were still skirmishes going on. So then that brings us to like 1997. There was like a final battle. Like people were fleeing. People were fleeing. My friend Soma, her mother and father had come back to Cambodia, and they said the energy in the city was like it was before the Khmer Rouge took the city, right? And so they were really afraid, and there was fighting, and they got on a plane and got out before they thought it would get worse. But it didn't. It did the same thing. The genocide did not happen again. Very interesting show. Got to go. Have a wonderful day. Hugs, everyone. Okay, Mumsy, thank you. Thank you for hanging in for an hour. I appreciate it. We're almost done. And then I'm going to show you the actual celebration. I've got the video all lined up. Okay, so now we're 1997. There's like a final skirmish. Ranariddh loses out to Hun Sen. Hun Sen becomes the only prime minister. And I believe it's 1998. He created his win-win policy. And we could do an entire show just on the win-win policy. But there's a particular strategy, and that is how they got everyone who was Khmer Rouge to surrender, and like an amnesty. It was like an amnesty. It's like, just change your uniform. That's all you need to do. We're gonna, take off the black pajamas and put on our uniform, and you are our Cambodian brothers. We will take care, we will take care of you as veterans, and so people did. And so that's the win-win policy basically happened. And then you've got 2001, I think Tomb Raider was shot here, and 2003, well, no, the premiere was in 2003. I think Tomb Raider and City of Ghosts were both shot close to the same time, right around 2001. And so you had some attention. Backpackers, Lonely Planet, all this were kind of starting up. Oh my gosh, the dogs are barking so much. I first came here in 2006. It's just been progress ever since. And that's why people keep voting for the CPP. A lot of people think that, the ruling party, that everyone's just scared and it's fear and all of this. And for some people, it probably is. But there's a lot of people that go, the elections are every 5 years. 5 years ago, what was my life like? Well, I didn't have a house. I didn't have any place to live, or maybe I had a house, but the only thing I could eat was rice, and now I've got rice and pork, or 5 years ago I had a motorcycle and now I have a car. People are able to look at their life every 5 years and go, it's better. Not everybody. There's some people that, and I'm all for opposition parties. I know that governments can change. That's why I try to stay neutral. I have friends who are ruling party. I have friends who are opposition party, and I want to keep it that way. So that's why I respect both. I'm not going to take sides one or the other. And hopefully I won't be in the situation that Sihanouk was, which was like the U.S. said, if you're not for us, you're against us. And we are going to Americanize you. That was Kissinger coined the term Americanization. All right. I think that covers. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? So a lot of people reject this holiday as a ruling party holiday. And I will say that they organize the party itself organizes this event. Okay, so it is kind of like their event. But I like to go to it because I think it is an important day in Cambodia's history, regardless of which side you're on. There's no more black pajamas, and that was significant. There were other parts, the Paris Peace Agreement was significant. And a lot of the opposition parties, they prefer to recognize that as like a turning point, and want to celebrate that as a holiday. And that's fine too. I think they should all be celebrated, but I'm not against celebrating this day just because they're the ones that are organizing it. Okay. So what am I talking? What did they organize? Well, I've got something else to share with you. Why doesn't it say share this? Oh, because I gotta share screen, share the tab. Okay. You guys see that? Yeah. Let me get rid of the replay, chat replay. So it's full. There we go. Okay. This is like the size of the event. Okay. Channy and I were sitting right back here, not under so there's like a little white roof. We were just behind the white roof.
មានវត្តមានប្រមុខថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំសភារដ្ឋសភារាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលតំណាងអង្គទូតនានាប្រចាំនៅកម្ពុជា
I'm not going to play like this whole thing because this is like in the beginning while they're waiting for the prime minister to arrive. Okay, here's the prime minister.
ប្រមាថសាទនៃប្រទេសជាតិកម្ពុជានិងជាប្រធានកិត្តិយសគណៈបកប្រជាជនកម្ពុជា
The former Prime Minister Hun Sen and his that's Hun Sen right there.
សម្ដេចទ្រង់អាយឧត្តមលោកជំទាវលោកស្រីដែលជាថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំបានអញ្ជើញដល់កន្លែងប្រពៃពិធីមេតិញនៅព្រឹកនេះដូច្នេះនៅក្នុងឱកាសនេះ
This is I think Murham Nam
ក៏ដូចជាក្រុមការងារសូមប្រគល់ទូនាទីនៃកម្មវិធីនេះប្រគល់ទៅគណៈចាត់តាំងកម្មវិធីដែលលោកនឹងដំណើរការកម្មវិធីមានជាបន្តបន្ទាប់
So then they come. Oh, see, it's three places. backdrop. They do a shot like this on the other side. Scales. I'll show the crowd again. The area. By the way, there were tons of drones.
សូមថ្វាយបង្គំសម្ដេចមហាសង្ឃរាជាធិបតីសម្ដេចព្រះសង្ឃនាយកសម្ដេចព្រះសង្ឃនាយករងព្រះថេរានុថេរៈគ្រប់ព្រះអង្គជាទីសក្ការៈដ៏ខ្ពង់ខ្ពស់ខ្ញុំបាទសូមគោរពសម្ដេចអគ្គមហាសេនាបតីតេជោ
So the first thing they're going to do is the national anthem, and then like a victory song, and then like a moment of silence remembering those who fought song. So they did 3 songs that we had to stand for. Everybody's still sitting. Oh, the monks chanted.
សុខណោសុមហន្តោចសុយតាំងប្រមចារិសុវណ្ណគិណង្កាយកម្មងយាចាកម្មងបតេខិណង្វណ្ណគិណង្វនោកម្មងបនិធិតេវណ្ណគិណវណ្ណគិណនិកតវានលវណ្ណហេវណ្ណគិណ
So I'll mention there are 2 Buddhist sects that are in Cambodia. This is Bu Kri. He is the leader of one sect, and the other leader of the other sect just passed away this year, or well, like in 2024. So this must be the new leader of the other sect, because that's the only reason they would have these 2 here. But you can see they wear different color robes. Well, Bukri does, but I think the monks in his sect still wear the orange. No. Okay, so next up, I think right after that was the
ជាកិច្ចបន្តខ្ញុំបាទសូមគោរពអនុញ្ញាតគោរពអញ្ជើញសម្ដេចគណៈអធិបតីសម្ដេចអាដាមលោកជំទាវអង្គពិធីទាំងមូលមេត្តាអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរឡើងដើម្បីគោរពទង់ជាតិនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាគោរពទង់គណៈបកប្រជាជនកម្ពុជានិងគោរពវិញ្ញាណក្ខន្ធគោរពទង់ជាតិនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាគោរពទង់គណៈបកប្រជាជនកម្ពុជានិងគោរពវិញ្ញាណក្ខន្ធគោរព
surprised that they didn't show the live singers. So we're sitting right here, right on the edge of this little tent area, but just behind it. Like, so there's chairs set up there, and that's where we are. And then, okay,
ហើយ
here's the good part.
7 មករាជា
We can
ថ្ងៃ
already
កំណើតទី
see we're
2
behind
របស់
them.
យើងទាំងអស់គ្នា
All together, Akania.
You've got the business idea. Now give it the right address.
It's not kind of a U.S. type of country. I'm good at them.
ជាយោរណសេសាមគ្គីសង្គ្រោះជាតិកម្ពុជា
Okay, so J.O. is what you say for like long live the king or whatever. Like it's kind of like victory. It's kind of like long live. If you say something with it, like if you say J.O. Kampuchea, it's like long live Kampuchea. Victory, long live. But the reason that they have this other flag is because that, I believe, is the flag of the troops that came in and entered Phnom Penh to kick the butts of the Khmer Rouge. Play. A lot of choreography. So they're kind of like acting like they're planting the rice. Just industrial construction, manufacturing, and infrastructure, just industrial workers. Because they're rebuilding the country. So here's the rice. Now the rice is being harvested. Rice is a really big deal for Cambodia. They've got other fruits and vegetables, agriculture. So like long live peace. Santa Pia is peace. You hear Santa Pia a lot. So now they're showing different industries, education, medical field, military, the justice system. And these girls, when they're going to open those up, and there's going to be pictures of different landmarks of Cambodia. I mean, sometimes like if there's a black robe, it's like being a judge, and this might be more like the men in suits might be more like business and commerce. He's got like a big pen. Military. Oh, hey, Robert. Robert's in the house. I'm just watching footage of the ceremony I went to this morning. Or fast forward to the speeches and stuff. But this is kind of exciting. The choreography of this. I already gave the history in the first hour, so I'll have to watch a replay if you're interested. Well, I didn't see those costumes when I was there. That's interesting. I think what that represents, water, Mekong River and the water and fishing. That would make sense. Hey, no, you can't be there. Piggy's settling down right in front of the chat. Yeah. Can't be there. Hey. Maz. Piggy. And these are Apsara dancers. So this is arts and culture. And those are jasmine flowers. Sprinkling. Really nice they have this overview to see the choreography. Yeah, I think that those girls in blue are rivers because then what they're holding is like a boat, because that shape on the end is like what's on the end of the boats, and that line that connects them together would probably represent the boat. Now I saw this one. It's a dove. So all these are like doves for peace. With the traditional chroma. Chani really liked this part, seeing the chromas. No zapping. So now it's like the grand finale. So basically, Chani and I would be right about here. I don't think you're going to be able to see us. Quite a lot of people leaving too. So like as soon as it was over, we get next to all the rich people cars that are leaving so that we can kind of like go along with them. So they have police directing them to go, so we kind of get along with it. All right, so I can fast forward now. So let me just say, when Hun Sen gave the speech, and basically you've got two parts. The first part is like recognizing all the history of the event, and then the second part is like a State of the Union address. Okay, so he speaks for quite a long time. I got a picture with him. This is Kep Chaktima. He used to be the governor of Phnom Penh. And so I went, so yeah, we're just sitting in the back, just not far from him. And so after he finishes his speech, then I think it's the Youth Federation gives a speech. That's this guy. And then I'll show just a little bit of this. Anybody who wants to can like register in advance so that everybody's in order to give flowers to them. So all the like ambassadors and all the rich people, the tycoons called oknyas, and then you kind of, so then you get like this picture giving the flowers, right? So that's what I told Chani. I said, everyone just wants to get their picture taken. Because this took a long time too. So it's all very organized. You've got their staff with the organizers of the event that are holding the flowers in order. And then they got to get the people to come down and line up in order so that all this part can go as quickly as possible. And see, then they hand it off to, they accept the flower, get the picture, and then hand it off to the side. So a lot of these are people that are like looking to do business in Cambodia as well. And then it gets past this. So they get the picture, and this guy takes it, hands it off the back. I wonder who actually like takes them all home. So this goes on for quite a while. People that are like sitting in the back, like us, then, well, half the people left, and you're not really supposed to, but I think they wanted to jump the traffic. And then still going on. This lady, she's like totally in charge of all the protocol. She's like, oh no, that's Men Sam Ang. I'm sorry. There's another lady in a purple dress. It's like in charge of protocol. It's like the woman with the power. So anyway, people go to the bathroom, whatever, get up, stretch their legs while all this is going on. Chani wanted to leave. I said, no, it's disrespectful to leave early. We have to wait until it finishes. Okay, so here we go. All right, let me pause here for a moment. You see this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the color. Each day of the week has a different color. So when there's a formal event, you are supposed to wear that color. And Tuesday is purple. Saturday is eggplant, a deeper purple. I call it eggplant for a deep purple. But it's just Tuesday is regular purple. So we both kind of had purple in what we were wearing. Although people at an event like this, okay, if it's like with the king, you got to be the right color of the week, all right? But an event like this, people were just wearing their favorite color. Not every, but you notice, some of the people were wearing purple, right? But yeah, that's so, and everybody's got a dove. And then there's these 3 in white that are like the doves, and they're going to give them, these 3 are going to give their doves to these 3 guys who are then going to like let it go. And one year, one of the pigeons or doves, I think they're pigeons, came up and flew around and came back and landed on my chair. And I was able to like take a quick picture of it. I have a picture of the pigeon on my chair. It's one of the ones that they let loose. I thought that was cool when that happened. Imagine the pigeon got away from me. There they go. There comes the balloons. And then next comes the balloons, and when the balloons are done, that's it. It's over. They got on their motorcycle to get out of there. And it was really nice. The balloons flew right over us, and Chani didn't have her camera on. It would have been so good. It would have been such a good picture. See how they just go right over, and like, and so we're sitting down here, and all of these balloons right here are just like flying right over our head.
គុណសម្ដេចគណៈអធិបតីសម្ដេចអាដាមលោកជំទាវដែលបានដល់កិត្តិយសចូលរួមនៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីពីដើមរហូតដល់ចប់មុននឹងបញ្ចប់កម្មវិធីខ្ញុំប្រកាសណាខ្ញុំបានក្នុងនាម
Okay, so that's it. Done. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let me remind you that love transcends time and space. So whenever and wherever you are when you're watching this, I love you. My love will reach you. It will, because it transcends time and space. So thank you for taking the time to join me tonight. And tomorrow we'll play a game. We'll do something fun. No more lecture. Oh my goodness. And this is Mama Kitty saying goodnight. So same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow. And hope to see you there. Catch you later.